The luxury car showroom gleamed under the bright lights, polished floors reflecting the sleek, expensive vehicles on display. Salespeople in sharp suits moved smoothly between customers, their practiced smiles never fading, unless, of course, the client didn't fit their idea of wealth. That's exactly what happened when she walked in. A black woman, dressed comfortably in stylish but understated clothes, stepped through the glass doors. Her presence was calm, confident, yet the moment she entered, a few salespeople exchanged glances. One even sighed, as if already tired. She ignored it, walking toward a stunning silver sports car, her fingers lightly grazing the hood. "Excuse me," a sharp voice cut in. A salesman, tall, slick-haired, with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes, approached. "This model starts at $150,000. Just so you know." She didn't look up. "I know." He blinked, then chuckled, exchanging an amused look with a colleague. "Right. Well, if you're just looking, maybe stand back. Fingerprints, you know." A beat of silence. Then, she turned to him fully, her gaze steady. "You assume I can't afford it?" The salesman's smile turned condescending. "No offense, but this isn't exactly a used car lot. Maybe try down the street?" She didn't react, but something in her stillness made him shift uncomfortably. Before he could speak again, another voice interrupted. "Ma'am, can I help you?" A younger salesman, nervous but polite, stepped forward, ignoring the glare from his coworker. She smiled, just slightly. "Actually, yes. I'd like to test drive this one." The first salesman scoffed. "Look, we don't do joyrides here. Unless you're serious." "I am." She reached into her bag and pulled out a black card, the kind that made even the rude salesman's mouth go dry. Silence. The younger salesman swallowed. "I'll, get the keys." As he hurried off, the first man stammered, I didn't realize." She cut him off with a look. "You should have asked." And with that, the game changed. The air in the showroom thickened as the younger salesman rushed off to get the keys. The first salesman, now pale and stiff, cleared his throat, trying to salvage the situation. "I apologize if there was any misunderstanding," he stammered, his earlier arrogance gone. She didn't respond, her eyes still fixed on the car. The silence was louder than any words. A few feet away, other customers had noticed the tension. A well-dressed couple paused their conversation, watching. One of the saleswomen whispered to another, and soon, the entire showroom staff seemed aware that something unusual was happening. The younger salesman returned, keys in hand. "Ready when you are, ma'am." She took them with a nod. "Thank you." As she slid into the driver's seat, the first salesman hovered awkwardly, unsure whether to follow. His colleague shot him a warning look, "Stay back." The engine roared to life, smooth and powerful. She adjusted the mirrors, her movements deliberate. Then, without another glance at the stunned staff, she pulled out of the showroom. Meanwhile, inside the showroom. The moment the car disappeared from view, the whispers erupted. "Did you see that card? Who is she? He's gonna get fired for sure." The rude salesman wiped his forehead, his confidence shattered. He turned to his younger colleague. "You knew?" The younger man shrugged. "No. But I wasn't gonna assume." A manager, alerted by the commotion, stepped out of his office. "What's going on here?" Before anyone could answer, a phone rang, the receptionist's. She answered, then her eyes widened. She covered the mouthpiece. "It's the regional director." The manager paled. "Put it through to my office. Now." As he hurried away, the remaining staff exchanged nervous glances. This wasn't over. On the test drive. The car handled like a dream. She took a long, scenic route, feeling the power beneath her fingertips. But her mind wasn't entirely on the drive. Memories flickered, other times, other places, where she'd been dismissed, ignored, or spoken down to. The sting never fully went away, no matter how much success she achieved. But today? Today was different. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Enjoying the drive? The showroom staff certainly won't forget you. She smirked. Word traveled fast. Back at the showroom. The manager's voice was strained as he hung up the phone. The regional director had been unhappy. He stormed into the main area, zeroing in on the first salesman. My office. Now. The man followed, shoulders slumped. The door shut behind them, but everyone could hear the yelling. A few minutes later, he emerged, face red, hands shaking. Without a word, he grabbed his things and left. The younger salesman exhaled. Well, that happened. The receptionist's phone rang again. She answered, then gasped. Ma'am? Yes, she just returned, oh. Oh. Everyone turned as the luxury car pulled back in. But this time, the woman wasn't alone. A sleek black SUV rolled in behind her, tinted windows hiding its occupants. The showroom staff held their breath. Who was she? And more importantly, what was about to happen? The luxury car purred as she parked it perfectly back in its spot. The showroom staff stood frozen, eyes darting between her and the mysterious black SUV that had followed her in. The doors of the SUV swung open. Out stepped two people, a sharply dressed man with a tablet in hand and a woman holding a professional camera. The man scanned the showroom like he was already drafting a report in his head. The woman lifted her camera and clicked, a photo of the stunned sales team. The manager, now sweating, rushed forward. What's going on? The woman from the car finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. This is my team. They're here to document how your business treats customers. The manager's mouth opened, but no words came out. The truth comes out. The man with the tablet stepped forward. Ma'am, should we begin the inspection? She nodded. Yes. Starting with their customer service records. The manager's face went white. Inspection? Who are you people? The woman smiled, a cool, knowing smile. I'm the new owner of this dealership. And from what I've seen today, we have a lot of work to do. Silence. Then, chaos. The staff erupted into panicked murmurs. The rude salesman, who had been lingering near the exit, looked like he might pass out. The younger salesman just grinned. The manager stammered, That's impossible. The owner is old Mr. Langley. He sold the chain last week, she said smoothly. I was coming by to observe operations before announcing the changes. But now. Her gaze swept over them. Now we'll be doing things my way. The fallout begins. The camera kept clicking as her team moved through the showroom, examining records, taking notes. The staff scrambled to look busy, but it was too late, the damage was done. The manager, desperate, stepped closer to her. Listen, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. That salesman? He's not representative of our. Actually, she interrupted, he's exactly representative of your business. And that's the problem. She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen, and held it up. A video played, the entire interaction with the rude salesman, from his condescending smirk to his shock at her black card. You're lucky this wasn't live, she said. But don't worry. It'll still reach the right people. The manager's knees nearly buckled. A lesson in power. She turned to the younger salesman, the only one who had treated her with respect. What's your name? Daniel, he said, standing straighter. Daniel, you're now head of sales. His eyes widened. What? She nodded at the manager. And you, Clean out your desk. The manager's mouth flapped open and closed like a fish. Before he could argue, her team ushered him away. The other staff watched, equal parts terrified and amazed. She turned back to Daniel. We're restructuring. New training. New policies. And zero tolerance for discrimination. Understood? Daniel nodded firmly. Yes, ma'am. Outside, a crowd gathers. Word had spread. A small crowd had formed outside the showroom, curious onlookers, customers, even a local news van pulling up. The woman with the camera smirked. Want me to handle them? The new owner shook her head. No. Let them watch. She stepped outside, the staff trailing behind her like nervous shadows. The crowd buzzed with whispers. Cameras flashed. A reporter called out, "Ma'am. Is it true you just fired the manager?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked back at the gleaming showroom, her showroom now, then at the people waiting for her response. Finally, she smiled. Let's just say, this place is getting a much-needed upgrade. The crowd outside the dealership buzzed with energy as the local news reporter shoved a microphone toward her. Can you confirm you're the new owner? And what exactly happened inside? She kept her expression calm but didn't take the bait. All official statements will come through proper channels later today. Behind her, the dealership staff stood frozen in the glass doorway, watching their new boss handle the growing media attention with effortless control. The fired manager had already slunk out the back door, but the rude salesman remained, now looking like he wanted to melt into the floor. The video goes viral. Meanwhile, across town, phones began pinging all at once. A popular social media influencer had just reposted the dealership video with the caption, "This queen just bought the whole dealership after they tried to disrespect her. Iconic. Crown #karma." Within minutes, the clip exploded. Comments flooded in. I know who that is. She owns like half the luxury brands in the city. That salesman's face when he saw her black card, priceless. New life goal, become rich enough to do this. Back at the dealership, one of the junior saleswomen gasped as her phone blew up with notifications. Oh my God. We're trending. The rude salesman's last stand. The man who started it all, now realizing his career was over, made one last desperate move. He pushed through the crowd toward the new owner, his voice shaking. Ma'am, please, I have a family to support. I didn't know who you were. She turned slowly, and the crowd fell silent. That's the problem, she said, her voice carrying clearly. You shouldn't need to know who I am to treat me with respect. The camera phones captured every second. He opened his mouth to argue, but a loud honk cut him off. A sleek town car pulled up, and a uniformed driver stepped out. Ma'am, your 3 o'clock meeting is waiting. She gave one last look at the defeated salesman. Clean out your desk by 5. Then she slid into the car, leaving the crowd in awe as it glided away. The aftermath begins. Inside the dealership, the remaining staff stood in nervous clusters. Daniel, the newly promoted head of sales, cleared his throat. All right everyone, mandatory sensitivity training starts tomorrow at 8 a.m. sharp. A few groaned, but most were too shell-shocked to complain. The junior saleswoman who'd spotted the viral video whispered, Do you think she'll fire more of us? Before Daniel could answer, the front doors swung open again. Everyone tensed, was she back already? But it was just a flood of new customers, many holding up their phones, laughing and pointing at the viral video still playing on their screens. One woman in a sharp pantsuit grinned as she approached the nearest salesman. So, you guys discriminate before or after the test drive? The staff exchanged panicked looks. This was only the beginning. The dealership was in chaos, but the good kind of chaos. Customers packed the showroom, many snapping selfies next to the now famous silver sports car. The junior saleswoman from earlier found herself swarmed with questions. So wait, she really bought the whole place after that guy was rude to her? A wide-eyed college student asked, recording everything on her phone. Before she could answer, Daniel stepped in smoothly. What matters is that under new ownership, we're committed to exceptional service for every customer. He flashed a professional smile, but his eyes kept darting toward the door. Where was she? Behind closed doors. Across town, the new owner sat in a sleek high-rise office, facing a frowning older man across a polished mahogany desk. Mr. Langley, the former dealership chain owner, tapped his fingers impatiently. You played me. That little stunt today? That was planned. She sipped her espresso, unfazed. I bought your failing business at market value. What I do with it now is my concern. Langley's face reddened. Those dealerships have been in my family for 40 years. You can't just. I can, she interrupted. And I will. Your family legacy had a 32% discrimination complaint rate last year alone. She slid a folder across the desk. Unless you'd like me to make that go viral too? Langley's mouth snapped shut. The salesman's dark turn. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit bar across town, the fired salesman slammed back his third whiskey. His phone buzzed constantly, mostly laughing emojis from former co-workers on his now public humiliation. A shadow fell across his table. Rough day? He looked up to see a slick-haired man in an expensive suit taking a seat uninvited. The stranger slid a business card across the sticky table. James Holloway, Senior VP, Titan Motors. The salesman squinted. Competition? Holloway smiled. Let's just say, my company is very interested in your story. And what you might know about your new boss's weaknesses. The salesman's eyes gleamed with newfound purpose. A surprise visitor. Back at the dealership, Daniel was handling the crowd like a pro when the doors opened again. This time, an elderly black man in a perfectly tailored vintage suit walked in, leaning on an ornate cane. The staff didn't notice him at first, until he stopped in front of the silver sports car and ran a wrinkled hand along its hood with the familiarity of an old friend. Daniel approached cautiously. Sir, can I help? The old man chuckled. Oh, I doubt it, son. I'm just here to see what all the fuss is about. He nodded toward the viral video still playing on someone's phone. My granddaughter always did have flair for the dramatic. Daniel's eyes widened. Granddaughter? The old man's smile deepened. Where do you think she got her business sense? Now, who do I talk to about test driving this beauty? Daniel's pulse jumped as the old man's words sank in. Her grandfather? He quickly straightened his tie. Right this way, sir. I'll get the keys immediately. As Daniel hurried off, the elderly gentleman studied the showroom with sharp eyes that missed nothing, the nervous staff, the gawking customers, the lingering tension in the air. His cane tapped lightly against the polished floor as he walked, a rhythmic sound that somehow commanded attention. A young salesman nearby whispered to a coworker, "That's Elijah Carter. He built the first black-owned auto empire in the state back in the 70s. The name rippled through the room like an electric current. The test drive that changed everything. Minutes later, Elijah was behind the wheel of the silver sports car, Daniel riding shotgun as they cruised down the boulevard. You handle a car well for a salesman, Elijah remarked, taking a sharp turn with surprising ease. Daniel gripped his seat. Why you too, sir? For a retired businessman. Elijah chuckled. Son, I could outdrive you in my sleep. He glanced at Daniel. But I didn't come here to race. I came to see if this place was worth saving. Daniel swallowed hard. And, is it? Elijah's expression darkened as they passed a billboard for Titan Motors, the same company the fired salesman had just met with. We'll see. The trap is set. Back at Titan Motors' corporate office, the disgraced salesman sat across from Holloway, spilling everything he knew: inventory secrets, client lists, even rumors about the new owner's expansion plans. Holloway slid an envelope across the table. "For your consultancy fee." The salesman peeked inside and grinned. But as he reached for it, Holloway's hand slammed down. "One condition. You get us dirt. Something that sticks. Discrimination lawsuits? Financial fraud? I don't care what, just make it hurt." The salesman's smile turned vicious. "Oh, I've got ideas." A warning from the past. That evening, Elijah sat across from his granddaughter in her penthouse, swirling a glass of bourbon. "You stirred up a hornet's nest today," he said. She smirked. "You taught me to never leave hornets alive." Elijah's face grew serious. "Titan Motors is sniffing around. And that fool you fired? He's talking to them." She set down her wine glass. "Let him. I have everything documented." Elijah leaned forward. "It's not paperwork I'm worried about. Titan plays dirty. Remember what they did to me in '89? A shadow crossed her face. The infamous, accidental, factory fire that had nearly bankrupted Elijah's original business. She stood abruptly. "Then we hit them first. The leak." At that exact moment, an anonymous Twitter account posted security footage from the dealership's back office, showing the now-fired manager laughing with Titan executives months earlier, bragging about keeping certain customers out. The caption read, "Guess who's been colluding with competitors to sabotage black buyers? Hashtag same old game." Within minutes, hashtag Titan Motors racist was trending nationwide. The grandfather's move. Elijah watched his granddaughter's phone light up with alerts. He pulled an ancient flip phone from his pocket and dialed a number from memory. "Charlie? It's Eli. Release the files." He hung up and winked at his stunned granddaughter. "Old men keep receipts too, baby girl." The internet erupted like a wildfire. Hashtag Titan Motors racist spread faster than anyone expected, dragging the company's dirty laundry into the spotlight. News outlets scrambled to cover the story, digging up past discrimination lawsuits Titan had buried years ago. Their stock price began plummeting before the markets even opened. Meanwhile, in her penthouse office, she watched the chaos unfold on multiple screens: financial news, social media, live cable coverage. A small, satisfied smile played on her lips. Then her phone rang. Unknown caller. She answered. A distorted voice hissed through the speaker, "You should have stayed in your lane." The line went dead. Titan strikes back. At Titan Motors headquarters, CEO Richard Vaughn slammed his fist on the conference table. "I want that woman buried." His legal team exchanged nervous glances. One brave attorney cleared his throat. "Sir, with all due respect, we should focus on damage control. The leaked footage alone." Vaughn cut him off with a glare. "No. We hit harder." He turned to Holloway. "You said you had something?" Holloway smiled and slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos, her at various charity events, shaking hands with politicians, even one with her grandfather at an industry gala. Vaughn's eyes locked onto one particular image. Well. Isn't that interesting? The leak that backfired. By noon, a conservative news outlet ran an explosive headline. "Activist businesswoman's ties to controversial political group exposed." The article claimed she'd donated to radical, social justice organizations. Comment sections filled with outrage, some calling for boycotts of her businesses. Her PR team went into overdrive. "These are blatant lies," her head of communications snapped during an emergency meeting. "You've never donated to any of these groups." She scrolled through the fabricated evidence calmly. Titans getting desperate. Her grandfather, sitting quietly in the corner, finally spoke up. Or they're stalling while they prepare something bigger. The salesman's last gamble. The fired salesman watched the news from a cheap motel room, surrounded by empty beer bottles. Titan had paid him well, but the internet had already doxed him. His face was everywhere, his name synonymous with racism. His phone buzzed. Holloway. We need you to go public. Tell them she set you up. He hesitated. Then he typed back. How much? The reply came instantly. Enough to disappear forever. He stared at the message, then at the gun sitting on the nightstand. The trap springs shut. That evening, as she prepared for a live television interview to address the smear campaign, Daniel called from the dealership, frantic. Ma'am, you need to see this, the fired salesman just went live on some fringe news channel. He's claiming you planted the whole discrimination incident. She switched channels just in time to see the salesman's tearful face filling the screen. Was all a setup, he sobbed. She paid me to act racist so she could play the victim and take over the company. The interviewer nodded sympathetically. And do you have proof of these allegations? The salesman hesitated just a second too long. Then the screen split, and security footage from Titan Motors' own parking garage appeared, showing Holloway handing the salesman a thick envelope days earlier. The video froze, zooming in on the envelope's contents. Cash. Lots of it. Her grandfather chuckled as he hung up his flip phone. Told you I kept receipts. The final move. As the live broadcast devolved into chaos, she received a text from an unexpected number, Richard Vaughn's private line. We should talk. She showed it to her grandfather, who shook his head. Don't do it, baby girl. That snake will. I know exactly what he'll do, she interrupted, already typing her reply. My office. 1 hour. Come alone. Then she opened her desk drawer and removed a small recorder. Time to end this. The elevator doors opened to reveal Richard Vaughn, CEO of Titan Motors, standing rigid in his custom suit, his usual arrogant smirk replaced by clenched jaw tension. 2 bodyguards flanked him. She stood waiting in her office doorway, arms crossed. I said alone. Vaughn dismissed the guards with a sharp nod. As they retreated, he stepped forward, eyes darting around the lavish office like a trapped animal. You've got 5 minutes. She smiled and gestured inside. Oh, we'll need much longer than that. The door locked behind them with a quiet click. The recording. Vaughn refused to sit. Whatever game you're playing. No games. She placed the recorder on her desk and pressed play. A familiar voice filled the room, Holloway's, speaking clearly, make it hurt. Discrimination lawsuits? Financial fraud? I don't care what. Vaughn's face went ashen. That's illegally obtained. From your company's servers? She tilted her head. Funny how that works. She tapped her keyboard, and the wall screen lit up with financial documents, secret payments, offshore accounts, all leading back to Vaughn. His hands trembled. What do you want? The offer. She slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. Vaughn read it, then laughed bitterly. You want me to sell Titan to you? At this valuation? It was 60% below market price. Correction, she said calmly. That's the generous offer before I release the rest of these files to the SEC, and the New York Times. She opened another folder, this one containing photos of Vaughn at a private island resort with several disgraced politicians. Vaughn's breathing turned ragged. You'll destroy thousands of jobs. And you destroyed generations of black businesses, her grandfather's voice boomed from the doorway. Elijah stepped in, holding an old ledger. Recognize this, Richard? Your father's real books from 1989? Vaughn looked like he might vomit. The fall. 24 hours later. Breaking, Titan Motors CEO resigns amid scandal. Stock crash, Titan shares halted after 78% drop. Exclusive, historic deal sees first black-owned auto empire acquire Titan. The internet exploded with memes, celebration videos, and the now iconic clip of her test driving the silver sports car set to started from the bottom. At the dealership, Daniel watched the news with the staff, all cheering, except one junior salesman who whispered, "So, are we all getting raises?" The room erupted in laughter. The new beginning. 1 month later, she stood beside her grandfather at the grand reopening of the flagship dealership, now completely remodeled, with a diverse new staff and community programs displayed proudly in the lobby. Reporters shouted questions. What's next for your empire? Will you run for office? Where's the salesman who started it all? She ignored that last one, though the answer was, facing multiple federal charges for fraud. Instead, she stepped to the microphone and said simply, "This isn't about revenge. It's about change." Then, with a playful grin, she added, "And yes, we're hiring." As the crowd cheered, Elijah squeezed her shoulder proudly. The cameras flashed, capturing the moment forever, not just as a victory, but as a warning. Underestimate people at your peril. Because you never know who they might become.